Interesting turn in the House last night. House Republicans Tuesday got a harsh introduction to the majority as more than 24 rank-and-file GOP lawmakers voted against reauthorizing the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was moved to the floor under suspension of the rules. That's where you need two-thirds. If you can get two-thirds vote on something in the House, you can suspend the rules, and that means no amendments, no debate, and is often used for non-controversial legislation so that they can just get it passed. But apparently they couldn't get the two-thirds vote.
Hey, what happened?
Well, I will tell you what happened. Glenn Greenwald has a little bit of commentary on it. 26 of the most conservative Republicans, including several of the newly elected Tea Party members, joined the majority of Democratic House members. That's the thing to keep in mind here, folks. We still have the majority of Democrats in the House voting against re-upping the Patriot Act. Because they're not patriotic, don't you know? And thus it felt 7 votes short of the two-thirds needed. Glenn Greenwald warns us the significance of this event shouldn't be overstated. The proposed Patriot Act extension still commanded support from a significant majority of the House, 277 to 148, and will easily pass once the GOP leadership brings up the bill for a vote again in a few weeks under the standard procedure, which requires only majority approval. Greenwald points out that Rachel Maddow last night pointed to a split on the right, at least a rhetorical one, between what she called the authoritarian conservatives and the libertarian conservatives. It might be interesting to have Jonathan Weiler back on to discuss this. At some point, the dogmatic emphasis on limited state power, not trusting the federal government, and individual liberties, all staples of right-wing political propaganda, especially Tea Party sloganeering, has to, one would think, conflict with things like oversight-free federal domestic spending, surveillance, limited government detention powers, and impenetrable secrecy. You know, really, the real story here is, I mean, if we were living in a universe where the presumption would be that Tea Party people and Republicans weren't full of crap every time they opened their mouth. If we lived in a universe where that was not the presumption, the real story would be, how is it possible that any members of the so-called Tea Party caucus, how is it possible that any Republicans who went up and read that Constitution could have even contemplated voting for an extension of this? I mean, that would be the real story here. Not that there was 26 wayward Republicans who decided to show some iota of integrity. And, of course, most of them probably voted against it because it had something to do with the health care reform. But that's if we were living in a universe that wasn't all effed up. But we're not. We're living in one where things like integrity and hypocrisy, and they're just words that end with a Y. That's all those things are. Now, Greenwald goes on to say there is precedent for this type of alliance between the left and the right in this regard. And you can see it in the audit the Fed and a couple other areas. At one point we had Jane Hampshire on to talk about this transpartisan type of coalition. But he writes, both liberal and conservative ideology can and should sustain popular opposition to ongoing reductions in civil liberties. It's the political establishment, regardless of the party to which it belongs, that is incentivized to seize always greater levels of power in the name of security. Thus, when Barack Obama tries to quash, and his administration tries to quash an investigation into the torture policies of the Bush administration, there's a prime example of it. So many, though not all, of our most consequential political disputes are far more about insider versus outsider than they are Democratic versus GOP, which he says, Greenwald, is a simplistic dichotomy used to keep the populace divided over trivial disputes and thus too fractured to resist the corruption and repression of the bipartisan ruling class. Now, he is talking in the context of civil liberties, but I think you could make this argument in an increasing and distressingly increasing amount when it comes to things like redistribution of wealth upwards. And it's part of the reason why I think Jim Webb left the Senate, announced his resignation today. You know, when you see people like John Paulson, whose hedge fund essentially created a market not just for overlooking loans that were bad, but created a market for bad loans so that he could do a bet against those loans in the marketplace. He could short those loans. And this is a conversation I've been sort of saving to have someone on to talk about the Financial Crisis Commission report, which incidentally I interviewed Mike Consul from the Roosevelt Institute for Ring of Fire this week. So check out Ring of Fire Radio this weekend, Saturday, I think 3 p.m. Eastern. You can listen to the live stream on Ring of Fire Radio. So this is increasingly a very important dynamic, which is not to suggest that there's any partners necessarily in the Republican Party for us. But it is an important dynamic to keep in mind, that the real battle is insider versus outsider. And frankly, that's why, you know, I often have in the past criticized people like Lawrence O'Donnell. I think his ideological inclinations are, I appreciate. But I think he speaks from the inside out. And I'm far more interested in a conversation about speaking from the outside in. As he sits in his one-room freezing room where everyone's wearing sweaters and hats because it's so cold. with taped together microphones and cables that we actually stitch ourselves out of bamboo reeds.
All of these things are true.
He goes on to say, despite my belief that such an alliance is both tenable and necessary, last night's Patriot Act underscores the fact that I'm ultimately quite pessimistic about its ability to produce any meaningful benefits in the near future. Well, me too.